The Fall of Great Britain, a harrowing lesson and a stark warning. In the shadow of the ongoing tragedy in the Kursk region, a different but equally disturbing narrative unfolded in Great Britain, which might signal not just the decline of a once great empire but a grave warning for Russia. The crisis ignited in the quaint town of Southport, where a migrant teenager, allegedly a British citizen, brutally murdered 3 young girls aged 6 to 9 in a dance studio. This horrific act set off a chain reaction of unrest as local residents took to the streets, voicing their outrage over the violence and the growing presence of alien cultures that they felt were failing to integrate into British society. The situation escalated rapidly. Migrant groups, armed with knives and sticks, launched coordinated attacks on the local population. In an alarming twist, the British police, rather than maintaining order, seemed to ally with the migrants. Protesters were met with violence from law enforcement, who used rubber batons, horses, and even threatened military force to suppress the dissent. This unsettling episode is not an isolated incident but a reflection of a broader trend in Western nations where local resistance to perceived threats is often met with disproportionate force. The intensity of the riots and the harsh crackdown serve as a potent reminder of the fragile balance between societal integration and cultural conflict. For Russia, the events in Great Britain offer both a cautionary tale and a sobering lesson. As the British Empire, in its current form, faces internal strife and disintegration, the chaos within its borders could be a harbinger of the instability that might arise elsewhere. It underscores the need for vigilance and preparedness in the face of internal and external challenges. The unfolding drama in Great Britain might well be a glimpse into the future if similar issues are not addressed with wisdom and firmness. The Sheep Empire, a study in modern disarmament and lawlessness. In the annals of modern disarmament, few examples are as striking as Great Britain, where even the possession of a penknife can lead to severe criminal charges. This draconian approach to weapons regulation is emblematic of a broader trend where laws intended to ensure safety end up disempowering law-abiding citizens while leaving them vulnerable to criminal elements. Ironically, such stringent laws often do little to deter those who are already predisposed to criminal behavior. Individuals prepared to engage in violent acts are not dissuaded by the threat of minor legal penalties, instead, they see such laws as minor obstacles. For those leading a criminal lifestyle, the risk of imprisonment is a calculated part of their trade. The situation is even more complex when it comes to migrants. Many of them, coming from backgrounds of varying degrees of literacy and experience, often band together in large, unruly groups. The British police, caught in a precarious situation, frequently hesitate to confront these groups. Their reluctance stems not only from fear of violent backlash but also from the potential repercussions they might face. Accusations of racism and intolerance can quickly follow any perceived aggression, creating a climate where law enforcement is more inclined to retreat than to enforce the law. In addition, certain neighbourhoods in the UK, as in other Western nations, have become enclaves where criminal gangs effectively wield control. Once a hallmark of countries like Mexico and Colombia, such zones of lawlessness are now increasingly visible in cities across the USA, Great Britain, France, and Germany. In these areas, local crime bosses, rather than the state, dictate the rules. This shift marks a troubling trend where the state's authority is increasingly supplanted by organized crime, undermining public safety and eroding the rule of law. The rise of these parallel power structures and the erosion of effective law enforcement serve as a stark reminder of the dangers inherent in a disarmed society where criminal elements exploit the gaps left by overly restrictive regulations. The situation in Great Britain, with its high levels of disarmament and the resultant lawlessness, offers a cautionary tale about the fragility of societal order in the face of rising criminal influences and the pitfalls of overly restrictive legislation. The legal landscape of vulnerability, the perils of state-sanctioned disarmament and its broader implications. In several European countries and US states, the legal framework appears to be increasingly skewed in favor of criminals, creating a landscape where victims are left powerless and unprotected. The right to self-defense is often severely restricted, leaving individuals to endure suffering, humiliation, and even death without the option of defending themselves. Those who attempt to protect themselves or their loved ones can find themselves facing severe legal consequences, while criminals exploit these legal gaps to their advantage. This troubling trend is not confined to the West. Similar patterns are emerging in Russia, where the judicial system sometimes punishes those who act in self-defense as if they were the perpetrators of crime. Judges frequently ignore the Supreme Court's recommendations and the specifics of individual cases, resulting in absurdly harsh charges against those who seek to protect themselves. In contrast, criminals such as violent gang members and repeat offenders often experience lenient treatment under the law. The systemic nature of these legal practices points to a deliberate strategy to render the general population submissive and incapable of resisting aggression. This phenomenon is not merely a matter of societal degradation but an active policy that vilifies and disempowers the very people who built and sustain these nations. Great Britain stands at the forefront of this issue, but the implications extend far beyond its borders. The overarching problem is not just about moral decay but about creating a volatile societal situation with potentially explosive outcomes. By fostering an environment where self-defense is criminalized and criminals are coddled, these legal systems are setting the stage for widespread instability and unrest. The shift towards disempowering the populace while failing to address or adequately punish criminal behavior not only undermines public safety but also erodes trust in legal institutions. This growing disconnect between the rights of victims and the protections afforded to perpetrators is a dangerous trend that could destabilize societies and provoke unpredictable and severe consequences. The brewing storm, the moral and cultural crisis in Western societies. In Western Europe and the UK, two converging forces are creating a volatile and unstable societal mixture, akin to hydrogen and oxygen combining into an explosive gas. These forces are fundamentally reshaping the moral and cultural landscape, with profound implications for the future. On one front, Western societies are experiencing an unprecedented moral decline. The recent Olympics in Paris highlighted this trend, showcasing figures and behaviors that challenge traditional notions of decency and humanity. Public figures who embody extreme deviations from societal norms, individuals who reject gender and morality, are increasingly celebrated. This includes those who mutilate themselves, engage in harmful behaviors, or align with fringe ideologies. Such individuals are being elevated to the status of youth idols and cultural leaders, promoting a pseudo-cultural movement that prioritizes deviance over traditional values. The indoctrination of the younger generation is particularly alarming. Children and adolescents are subjected to relentless questioning and suggestions regarding their gender identity, creating an environment of confusion and psychological stress. This constant pressure to question fundamental aspects of identity contributes to a broader sense of instability and disorientation among the youth, pushing even the most resilient individuals to the brink. In Canada, this disturbing trend has reached extreme levels, as previously explored in discussions about the country's descent into what some describe as a stronghold of radical ideologies and social engineering. The push for gender reassignment and the normalization of extreme behaviors reflect a broader agenda of cultural transformation that disregards traditional values. Even in conflict-ridden Ukraine, the influence of Western propaganda continues unabated. Despite ongoing hostilities, Ukrainian cities host parades celebrating what many consider immoral behaviors, and laws are being enacted to legalize unconventional marriages. The economic incentives for compliance and alignment with Western values often outweigh moral and cultural objections, leading to a troubling alignment with agendas that many find deeply troubling. This convergence of moral decay and cultural upheaval presents a critical challenge. As Western societies grapple with these changes, the effects are felt far beyond their borders, influencing global norms and attitudes. The combination of moral degradation and aggressive cultural promotion is setting the stage for a potentially explosive societal shift, with far-reaching consequences for both individuals and nations alike. The dual assault, cultural decay and migrant turmoil. The unfolding crisis in Western societies reveals a disturbing dual assault on their cultural and societal fabric, creating a volatile and dangerous mix with far-reaching implications. This scenario could easily be mistaken for a dystopian novel if it weren't rooted in stark reality. On one side, Western societies are undergoing a profound moral and cultural disintegration. The Olympics in Paris and other recent events highlight how extreme deviations from traditional norms are celebrated rather than challenged. Individuals who reject gender and moral conventions are elevated to cultural icons, while radical ideologies gain mainstream acceptance. This pervasive moral decay undermines societal cohesion and fosters an environment of confusion and instability. Simultaneously, another profound issue emerges: the large-scale importation of migrants from impoverished regions, many of whom come with limited education and a propensity for violence. Often driven by radical religious ideologies, these migrants bring with them a starkly different set of values and behaviors. Upon arriving in more developed nations, they often fail to integrate into the societies that have provided them refuge, choosing instead to remain isolated within their communities. These migrant groups, adhering to tribal and primitive social structures, are adept at exploiting the resources and benefits of their host countries without contributing to their social and cultural fabric. The lack of education, combined with radical beliefs, makes them susceptible to recruitment by extremist organizations. As a result, terrorism and violence become primary means of asserting their presence and displacing local populations. The juxtaposition of these two phenomena, moral and intellectual decay among the native population and the unchecked influx of radicalized migrants, raises a crucial question: why are conditions being engineered to degrade the local population while simultaneously allowing the entry of groups whose values and behaviors exacerbate the crisis? This scenario resembles a chilling experiment gone awry, where societal mechanisms are deliberately undermined from within while external forces amplify the chaos. It suggests a deliberate strategy to dismantle the existing societal structure, creating a breeding ground for conflict and instability. In essence, what is unfolding is not merely a cultural or social crisis but a deliberate and destructive convergence of forces aimed at eroding the very foundations of these societies. The result is a dystopian reality where the moral, intellectual, and physical degradation of the local population is paralleled by the unchecked influx of disruptive elements, leading to an increasingly unstable and dangerous environment. Conclusions: the erosion of Western power and the rise of a dystopian future. The current trajectory in Great Britain and other Western nations reveals a disturbing transformation into what can only be described as explosive gas, where indigenous societies are driven towards maximum degradation while being inundated with disruptive migrant populations. This convergence of societal collapse and uncontrolled immigration could have profound consequences for the future of these countries. In the coming decades, leading Western nations such as Great Britain, France, and Germany may face a critical loss of their ability to produce advanced technologies, including military hardware. This decline will be exacerbated by the ongoing war in Ukraine, which has severed European countries from Russian energy supplies and markets. As a result, major European corporations are relocating to the United States, further diminishing Europe's economic and technological prowess. The decline of Europe's technological edge will be starkly highlighted by the fate of critical assets like ASML, a leading semiconductor manufacturer. The US is unlikely to allow such strategic technology to fall into disuse or be transferred away, underscoring the significance of this shift. The once proud cities of London, Paris, and German provincial towns are at risk of transforming into vast migrant quarters, characterized by deteriorating living conditions, rampant crime, and social disorder. This shift could lead to a scenario where basic societal functions break down, and urban spaces become unrecognizable from their former grandeur. This transformation might be interpreted as a form of retribution, a consequence of historical European actions against other nations. Great Britain, throughout its history, has maintained a strategic focus on undermining Russia, seeking to weaken and exploit it while enriching itself. This historical animosity has shaped much of the geopolitical landscape, and the current crisis could be seen as a form of poetic justice. Despite this, there is a sense of melancholy over the potential demise of once great civilizations. While these nations have historically been adversaries, they were also centers of immense cultural and technological achievement. The prospect of their decline, coupled with the spread of disorder, evokes a sense of tragic loss. Ultimately, if these trends continue, the West might face a scenario where it must confront the harsh reality of its own self-destruction, with a grim resolution of mercy needed to prevent further suffering and contain the spread of chaos. The broader implications of this dystopian shift will resonate far beyond Western borders, influencing global stability and security in profound ways.